I think, Mr. Carell, is your name Kevin Stephen Carell?
Yes, it is.
And you have been giving evidence in the inquest?
Yes.
Did you meet with Rachelle Childs on 7 June 2001 at Bargo?
Absolutely not, no.
Just days before Christmas in 2006, Kevin Carell is giving evidence at the inquest into the death of Rachelle Childs. It's 5 years since Rachelle's murder. Unbeknownst to Kevin, while he's on the stand at Glebe Coroner's Court, Rachelle's body is beneath him, in the same building, being re-examined by a forensic anthropologist.
Sitting in the stand, Kevin Carell was told Rachelle's body has recently been exhumed. I didn't know that, replied Mr. Carell.
He hasn't been charged. All other persons of interest have now been cleared.
Counsel assisting the coroner, Peter Singleton, told him further post-mortem examination has found at least one digit is not present. It's information police never made public. Kevin Carell, a grandfather of 3, strenuously denies any involvement and in court today tried to avoid taking the stand. His lawyer claiming Mr. Carell might be tricked into giving answers that suggest he's guilty.
I'm Ashlea Hansen, and you're listening to episode 8 of Dear Rachelle, a podcast by True Crime Australia. This is the untold story of Rachelle Childs. In this episode, excerpts from the coronial transcripts have all been voiced by actors, including those of Kevin Carell. It's important to mention non-publication orders prevent us from revealing some witnesses and their evidence, and even evidence from certain days has been suppressed. Those court orders still stand. Mr. Carell, who was Rachelle's boss at Camden Holden, has always denied any involvement in the murder of his young protégée, Rachelle Childs, and he's never been charged.
My name is Peter Singleton. I'm a barrister and I was the counsel assisting the coroner in the inquest into the death of Rachelle Childs.
Here's Peter Singleton reading his own opening address.
This matter has involved many victims. Rachelle Childs, of course, is the primary victim. She has tragically lost her life. Her family have suffered greatly, and her friends have also suffered. So too have other persons and their families when those persons have come under police scrutiny for a crime they did not commit. And indeed, in this inquest, there will be further pain as painful issues are necessarily canvassed. Even the family of the killer is likely to suffer discomfort in a number of ways in this inquest. I anticipate, given the large number of witnesses that have to be called, that family members of the killer will have to give evidence, which is never a pleasant experience. I anticipate that they will learn things about their family member that they did not previously know, not just about this matter, but about their personal background. Such suffering is regretted, but it is necessary in pursuit of the important functions of this inquest.
The inquest ran over 2 years, with multiple adjournments. Almost 100 witnesses were called to give evidence at Glebe Coroner's Court in Sydney's Inner West. The building was on one of Sydney's busiest roads, Parramatta Road.
I would recall it as a brutalist type building. It seemed to be basically made of concrete with perhaps some pebblecrete or some other weak attempt at beauty. But essentially it was relatively dark inside, unattractive, unadorned, unappealing and unsympathetic to the people who had to be in it.
It had been 5 years without answers for Rachelle's loved ones. Her sister Kristy and her mum Anne can remember sitting in the courtroom.
We were there every day, all day, and it was hard. It was hard listening to people talk about it. It was hard listening to people refuse to answer questions too. That was infuriating. If you've got nothing to hide, why are you not answering questions? That was Kevin, who eventually refused to answer any more questions, which was his right. But why wouldn't you just answer the questions? Don't be an arsehole.
Writing our own little
notes and listening and feeling sorry for those who had to go through it. This is just like the same we were going through, sort of, because they all cared about her, all the people on the stand.
Can you give us some context around what led to Rachelle's inquest being held in 2006?
The police had conducted an investigation. They had a brief of evidence, but it wasn't sufficient to lay any charges. In this case, the state coroner decided there should be a hearing or an inquest.
There were 9 persons of interest. Is that unusual to have so many persons of interest for a homicide?
I think it probably is unusual. My experience may differ from others, but it seems to me more than average. Bear in mind that these investigations and inquests often need to be thorough and need to canvass all the possibilities. We don't go into them with a closed mind. In this case, there were 9 people who had had some connection to Rachelle in the period leading up to her death. All of that needed to be explored. Mr. Carell was one of the 9 people who were in proximity to Rachelle at relevant times. There was evidence suggesting that he would perhaps have wanted to have a personal relationship with her beyond the workplace, and that he might have been a person who was going to meet her at a relevant time, and that needed to be explored. My recollection is he was a fairly calm witness.
Let's return to some of Kevin's testimony. Kevin Carell was legally represented by Matthew Johnston, a criminal lawyer. You're about to hear an exchange between Peter Singleton and Kevin Carell, voiced by actors.
The proposition is that in the course of this inquiry, by order of the coroner, Rachelle Childs' body was exhumed for a further post-mortem examination. Do you understand that?
I didn't know that, but I understand what you're saying.
When you say you didn't know it, today's the first time you've heard it.
Yes.
I want you to understand that as a result of the examinations that have so far been conducted of her person, or her remains, in this inquest, there has been, for some reason, discovered that at least 1 digit, if not more than 1 digit, is not present. Do you understand that? Do you understand what that means?
Yes.
During the course of the inquest, we received information that one of the people of interest had been spreading the story that Rachelle had been killed by bikies who had cut off her fingers. The initial autopsy had not looked at that, or at least resolved that possibility. So the coroner ordered that the body be exhumed and a second autopsy be performed to see whether or not that could be confirmed one way or the other. It was plainly significant if it could be shown that her fingers had been cut off, because that would be known only to the murderers or someone the murderers had told, meaning that the person spreading the story was either a murderer, had been told by somebody, leading to a chain of inquiry, or had just made something up that by amazing coincidence matched the crime.
How extraordinary is that for a coroner to order the exhumation of a body?
In my experience, it's very rare. I don't think that's an uncommon experience. I think it is very rare, and it is only done pursuant to a legal order.
And when they went back to the autopsy, it wasn't conclusive what had actually happened to her fingers. So they thought, oh gosh, is there merit in this?
It's believed the initial autopsy conducted on Rachelle's badly burned body acknowledged at least 1 finger was detached. But what caused that detachment wasn't clear. Was it from the fire? Or was it cut off by her killer? This was a pivotal moment in the inquest. Could this be the breakthrough police were waiting for? Rachelle's family was consulted in a secret meeting about the prospect of exhuming her body. They could legally fight the order, but they supported the drastic measure in the hope the truth would be revealed.
When we went to Leppington to exhume her, I wasn't allowed to tell anyone. So the only people that knew, aside from New South Wales Police and the coroner, was Mum and Dad. And I can't cope with their emotions and they can't cope with mine. Like when we go to break down, we go away from the others because we're so close. We know what it does to each other. So I couldn't sit with them.
It was such an invasion. But they needed to look for something.
Yeah, I remember sitting in the car with Detective Haywood, who was like my adopted big sister at the time. Mum and Dad were in a different car because I just, again, couldn't be with them when it happened. Yeah, out at the cemetery, which is, I go out there a lot. It was horrific. And we followed the van into Glebe the whole way. It was really surreal following her on the road. And she was actually with the medical examiner at the time that Kevin was on the stand giving evidence or refusing to give evidence at the coroner's court.
I just got goosebumps.
But no, that was like another knife in your back.
I did tell the person who had been spreading the story that the body had now been exhumed and was now being autopsied or was about to be. I asked him to give evidence knowing that fact.
Did you try and use that situation to your advantage?
Not to my advantage, but what one is trying to do is get truthful evidence. And there's a balance to be struck between pursuing that and always ensuring that it's a fair procedure. So in this case, Mr. Krill was the witness. Our purpose is not to trap him unfairly, but to persuade him to tell the truth. In this case, telling him that the autopsy was underway or about to occur informed him of an important piece of information that, in fairness, he should know, and also conveyed to him that the investigation was continuing, further evidence may become available, and that it would be best for him to tell the truth. And that's the thinking behind that line of questioning.
I also want you to understand that some of her digits from her hand were apparently not connected to the rest of her body at the time. Are not connected, seem not to have been connected to the rest of her body. Did you just understand that proposition? Yes. And I want you to understand this important point. The examination has not finished, and we are yet to be told the result, the final result, of all of the investigations as to whether or not her hand or fingers have in fact been cut off. That's a matter for further forensic examination. It may be that they were not cut off. We don't know the result. Do you understand that? Mm-hmm. Is there anything you wish to say to this court about the correlation between the fact that you have been allegedly speaking to people about the cutting off of her hand or fingers, and the possibility that, indeed, there has been some severance of those parts of her body?
No.
Peter Singleton was pressing Kevin on information about Rachelle's body that he allegedly circulated to other people, including his former partners Alice and Evelyn. Last episode, Evelyn told us she held some information back on the stand for fear of hurting Rachelle's family. But she did call police the following morning with crucial information.
Kevin, on a few different occasions, 2 that I can recall, said to me that Rachelle's fingers were severed by bikies. That's what you do when you steal from bikies. Now, I said, I'm sorry, but I just didn't want to say that in front of her parents. I just didn't want to. So with that, she said, okay, I don't want you to talk about this to anybody, and I will contact you tomorrow morning. So 24 hours had passed, and she contacted me and said that there's been a decision to exhume Rachelle's body.
Like the rest of Rachelle's loved ones, the exhumation hit her best friend Lisa hard.
The imagery that comes up, you know, when they tell you that's what you're doing, you think of her and you see her, but you see what she probably could look like now, and a cold table and a room, and no one's hugging her, and that was tough. Just kind of brought her back in many ways. Yeah, and then you have hope again. This is going to lead to something, you know. Yes, this is a horror, but it's going to lead to something. You couldn't think it up. And it's just, the blow after blow after blow. You just can't, breaks you down.
Let's hear some more of Kevin's evidence.
Do you agree that in the days after Rachelle Childs had been killed, you undertook the task of cleaning out her office, cleaning out her desk?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
In your view, was Rachelle Childs a fairly easygoing, happy-go-lucky type of person?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
Mr. Carell, you indicated to police that Miss Childs had recently broken up from a relationship with Shane Loates, didn't you?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
You also told police that you had overheard a conversation about Miss Childs going to a rebels party, didn't you?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
You also told police about a married man called Bruce that lived nearby her at Bargo, from whom Miss Childs had received flowers at work, didn't you?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
You also told police that she was seeing a male called Lee, who worked at Camden Bow Repairs, didn't you?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
And in so giving information to police, as I've canvassed in the last approximately 5 questions, you raised for the consideration of police investigation Shane Loates, the former boyfriend, the person, whoever it may be, who had swapped the car with her, Sash, and anyone else to do with the rebels, Bruce the neighbour, and Lee of Bow Repairs. 5 people who became persons of interest, didn't you?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
But you did not raise with the police that Rachelle had met someone over the internet and gone to see that person, did you?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
Mr. Carell, did you hear various rumours and other bits of informal information about what had happened to Rachelle Childs?
On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
Kevin was legally entitled to exercise his right to silence. The objections he took to answering questions are not to be taken as any admission as to his guilt or innocence. This case was dogged by red herrings. Remember, in the beginning there was a vicious rumour that Rachelle had been killed by bikies over a drug debt. It's now becoming clearer who was involved in peddling that rumour.
He said that her fingers had been cut off because she'd ripped off the rebels or something like that.
But because she was set on light, they could have just burnt. And they need to look at that to see if her fingers were severed.
And it wasn't, did the rebels do that? It was definitely looking at Kevin. Did he have, information about what happened to her fingers? And if he did, how did he know that? It was horrible. And then we buried her again.
Miss Childs had been led by someone to believe that a Walkinshaw Commodore would be acquired by her dealership at Camden Holden and would arrive on the 8th of June 2001. Miss Childs generally made no secret of her plans and movements. It seems that it would be possible to account for nearly every day of her life because she readily confided her activities to various friends and relatives and, importantly, happily discussed them at work, especially in social telephone calls which were able to be overheard.
We'd organised for these drinks on the Thursday to go and have a drink, and I said, I'm not going to go. I've been on the phone all night. I'm just going to go home. And we had that conversation down in the train carriage where anybody could have heard that conversation, that the plans had changed, that she was just going straight home.
As of the morning of 7 June 2001, and indeed probably as of lunchtime on that day, Ms. Childs had no special plans for Thursday evening. Yet, by that afternoon, she had made a plan to meet someone that evening. That plan was not communicated to any of the friends and family members to whom Ms. Childs usually communicated her plans, probably simply because of the lateness of the plan. Ms. Childs had planned to attend work on the Friday, not because she was rostered on that day, but because she was expecting a Walkinshaw Commodore to be there and available for her use on that long weekend. Because she had been killed, Ms. Childs did not attend work that Friday. The last matter I would mention in this list, Your Honour, is that no Walkinshaw Commodore in fact arrived at the dealership.
Peter Singleton wasn't the only one determined to get to the bottom of this flashy ice blue car.
Kevin, her boss, told her that a Walkinshaw was coming into the car yard and that she could have it for the long weekend. So that was really exciting, but we had to keep it quiet.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. I was just like, that's so awesome, because I knew how much she loved Commodores. And at the time, I'm no car person, but I know a Walkinshaw is like one of the big cars, you know, like that's a special car. So I was excited for her.
Why the secrecy behind the Walkinshaw?
I don't know for sure, but I think because it was such a classic and worth so much money, and back then it was something that someone would want to steal. So it's not something that you would publicise that you had one of these and that you were going to be driving it around, because you didn't want it flogged, basically.
Let's go back to Jim Morrison. He was the manager of Camden Holden when Rachelle and Kevin worked there.
I had no knowledge of one being negotiated on, traded or anything. Never been discussed, either with me, and I'm pretty sure through the business owner, he's checked that with the other branch just to see if any of the valuers or managers over there had any knowledge of it, and by memory, no, they didn't. So where this Walkinshaw suddenly materialised from, even though it never did materialise, is a bit of a mystery. It wouldn't be done secretly. It's just too big a deal. And for Rachelle to assume that it's coming in or be told that it's coming in, I'm not sure whether she's just naively believed that, or there was a bit of, don't let Jim know. I don't think that would be necessarily a conversation. I'm more inclined to think it might have been just some sort of furphy. There was never a Walkinshaw, but it was put up for whatever reason. And I can't understand why.
With hindsight, looking back, and the secrecy that was around it, do you think there was another motivation behind keeping it hush-hush?
Looking back on it, I think that the Walkinshaw is the key to this. I don't know whether it existed or not, but the fact that she was so excited about it and she had to keep it so quiet, and then no one ever spoke about it again, to me, that's suspicious, and I think it needs to be investigated. I think it's the key to this. I just keep circling back to that. That's what she was excited about. That's what she was focused on. That's all she could talk about, even though she wasn't supposed to. I think it's incredibly important that we get to the bottom of this. It was promised to her. Why was it promised to her? Was there actually a Walkinshaw?
On the last episode, we revealed explosive new evidence from Kevin's ex-partner, who you know as Evelyn. She told us Kevin showed off a Walkinshaw in his carport just a year after her murder at his unit on the south coast at Warilla, which is just 30 kilometres north of where Rachelle's body was found.
Evelyn approached me on Facebook because my friend Mindy and I have built a Facebook page, and she approached me and I called her and I spoke to her for probably about an hour and a half on the phone, just asking her lots of questions.
Around 8 o'clock in the evening, I had a few phone calls with Kristy, and sorry, sweetie. Talking to her, I realised that, you know, it's not just a story in a paper. It is somebody's child and sister and whatnot. And she was obviously very careful with what she said to me. But the information that I obviously knew, nobody knew. And I didn't know that. When we were talking at the time, she did say to me, had you ever gone to his home? And I said, yes, I had.
So I asked her just to think about when she was at Kevin's unit at Warilla, and I just asked her, what did she notice? What could she see?
And I told her the story about me being unwell and what the house looked like. And
what were on the walls? What was on the floor? What was she stepping on? What did she notice?
I said that he had a big knife that was on his bed head hanging there.
Was there anything unusual?
She said, so where did you go? And I said, well, we walked out the front door to go across to the beach. And he said, oh, come and have a look at my car.
And it's incredible that that's when this piece of information came out, because I just said, what do you notice?
I want to show you my pride and joy. And we were just talking about that. And she went, oh, okay, so nothing else. I said, yeah, he had like a silvery blue coloured car. I said it was a Walkinshaw. I said, I remember the name because I always thought it was a pretty name.
And she said, oh, yeah, he had one of those Walkinshaw cars in his carport, and I nearly fainted.
She said to me, it was what? And she stopped for a moment, and I thought, oh, my God, have I said something I shouldn't say?
And then I asked her, are you sure?
And she said, please tell me what you said again. So I did.
Describe to me what a Walkinshaw looks like, and she described it. And she remembered having a conversation with her son at the time, who was a car fan, and he said to her, oh, yeah, no, that's a really, that's a classic. That's a very expensive car. She was only ever asked by the police what he drove, so she didn't think it was important.
She said, Evelyn, you didn't say that in your police statement, the name of the car. And I said, no, I told them that he had a really fancy, expensive-looking silverish car.
She was only ever asked by the police what he drove, so she didn't think it was important.
And she said, you never said the name of it. And I said, well, I didn't really think that was important, what kind of brand it was. They just asked me what kind of car he had.
So the fact that she saw a Walkinshaw in the car yard at his unit block is significant.
Was this an oversight by police? Here's Evelyn reading from a subsequent statement to police in 2007.
I then thought of my relationship with Kevin Carell between November 2002 until February 2003. I recall that whilst I was with Kevin, he had 4 different new cars during that time. They'd be second-hand, but quite new and expensive cars. I recall the very first time that I met Kevin, he had a black Celica sports car. The car looked to be brand new. It was very impressive. He had this car for a couple of weeks, and I never saw this car again. The next car I saw Kevin with was a silver fancy Commodore. He only had this car for about 4 weeks. I said that. And she went, oh my God. And that's how she told me the story.
And that's a piece of information that wasn't gathered by police because their line of questioning wasn't open enough, in my opinion. But it's very important.
Do you think that needs to be investigated now by police?
Definitely, and they know because Evelyn has communicated that to police.
While the inquest was still underway in April 2007, police assigned detectives to track down every single Holden Walkinshaw ever manufactured, all 750 of the limited models. Detective Senior Constable Erica Nuttall, assisted by Detective Senior Constable Sally Clark, were tasked with interviewing every owner and asking them the same 8 questions. 1. Were you the registered owner of a Holden Commodore Group A Walkinshaw motor vehicle on the 7th of June 2001? 2. Do you know Kevin Carell? 3. Have you ever been approached by Kevin Carell to borrow your Walkinshaw motor vehicle on or around June 2001? 4. Do you know Rachelle Childs? 5. Have you ever been approached by Rachelle Childs to borrow your Walkinshaw on or around June 2001? 6. Have you ever had any dealings with Camden Holden on or around June 2001? 7. Has any employee from Camden Holden ever approached you to borrow your Walkinshaw on or around June 2001? 8. Is there any further information you have that may assist this investigation? It took them months to complete that mammoth task, but they found no connection between any registered Walkinshaws and Kevin Carell, Rachelle Childs or Camden Holden. But as was acknowledged in the last line of Detective Nuttall's statement, the information does not capture vehicles that have been fitted with body kits or accessories to look like genuine Walkinshaw vehicles. Basically, there are fakes out there, other Commodores kitted out to look like Walkinshaws, and because they're not registered as Walkinshaws, it's impossible to account for them all. Let's hear from Ben Hill, a family friend of the Childs and a car mechanic who specialises in high-performance vehicles. You'll remember his voice from earlier episodes when he assessed Rachelle's beloved Holden. How difficult is it to distinguish between an authentic Walkinshaw and a fake?
It's very difficult. Unless you're a trained expert or an obsessive collector, if one drove past or pulled up in a car park, you wouldn't be able to spot the difference with the amount of reproduction stuff that you can buy and could even buy then to make a mock-up.
So talk me through that. How does that process play out if someone's trying to fake a walkie?
Basically, if somebody knew somebody and they could buy something in the black market, then they were buying body kits and they were buying twin throts and rebirthing a 6-cylinder VL Commodore, and it was actually reusing all the original components off a Walkinshaw.
Knowing Rachelle, if she was promised a Walkinshaw for that June long weekend,
she would have jumped off the Harbour Bridge for that. Yeah, if there was an opportunity to drive it, be in it, she would have given up a left leg to have that opportunity to drive that car, I believe.
And would she have known if it was a fake?
Oh, I don't believe so. Again, if it was parked there with the bonnet shut and it had replica everything on it, it would look like a walkie. If it was in the garage, so unless you're a trained collector and you know what to look for, if you just opened the roller door and the light was turned on and it looked like a walkie, you'd think it was a walkie if it had the right interior, the right paint, the right wheels, the right stickers. You'd definitely believe it.
So it's possible Rachelle's boss, Kevin Carell, had access to or owned a fake Walkinshaw at the time of Rachelle's murder, and police would have been none the wiser. Let's break this down with Damian.
The Walkinshaw comes into it, the fact that she was promised to have one for the weekend, that weekend. And to find that Kevin Carell's got one in the MSC and a year later in a garage of a premises on not far from Jerawa in the Illawarra, was that ever discovered at the time? Because it sort of concerns me.
Would police at the time had known if he had a Walkinshaw?
They would have, but as long as the vehicle was registered in his name. If it wasn't in his name, then no, they wouldn't have known.
What about if it was a fake Walkinshaw?
No, because the model doesn't come up on the RTA records as being a particular. It only comes up the standard model of the vehicle. So it was a VB model made to look like a Walkinshaw. It'd only say it's a VB. It wouldn't say it's a Walkinshaw. It's only a kit goes on and makes you look like a carb.
I'm keen to tell Peter Singleton about this possible breakthrough. Someone has come forward saying that they saw Kevin in possession of an alleged Walkinshaw a year after Rachelle's murder. Do you think that's of interest, and should that be something that police should be looking at today?
Yes, I would say it would be of interest. I can't comment on police resources. I know they've got a lot of other work to do, but it would strike me that the information should be followed up. Most likely explanation would be that he's acquired an interest in Walkinshaws himself. But of course, the police will want to know when he got it. And did he have it back in 2001?
Did it have to be his? Could it have just been a Walkinshaw that he had access to, potentially?
Well, potentially. I mean, a possibility is that he or whoever it was borrowed a Walkinshaw and took her for a drive. And maybe it was just to impress Rachelle in the hope of a return favour that was never forthcoming, leading to violence. So there are possibilities. Undoubtedly, the Walkinshaw featured heavily in this inquest for various reasons, and it is a matter that should be followed up. Someone's got this information, they should be interviewed.
Given the Walkinshaw was a major focus in the inquest, it is possible people's memories could be contaminated unintentionally. Here's Damian.
Well, you really have to be careful in relation to the witness's contamination, and particular when the evidence is laid bare at any inquest or perhaps trial. You really have to be careful of how they are forming their thoughts and what they think they saw or heard, and they weren't compromised by any other witnesses who may have said something else, and they're just following the line that they saw or heard.
It was clear the inquest was very interested in Kevin Carell's behaviour before and after Rachelle's murder. Several witnesses were called to give evidence about their interactions with Kevin. Here's Peter Singleton recapping a witness who testified that Kevin had made a troubling comment just 3 days before Rachelle was murdered and her body set on fire.
A friend of Rachelle, who was a firefighter or a volunteer firefighter, happened to be visiting Rachelle at work and was talking to Rachelle outside the used car sales manager's office, which is actually an old train carriage from memory. Rachelle asked the friend whether she'd ever seen a dead body or something to that effect. The answer was no, and somehow the conversation got into this murky territory, but Mr. Carell came out of the carriage and was physically higher than them, looking down upon them, and did make the comment that burning a body would be a good way to get rid of a murder victim.
I asked Peter Singleton to explain how much weight he placed on that particular comment.
Well, of course it's interesting because Rachelle's body was burned by whoever did it. By itself, that means nothing. Anybody could have said it. Many people have said such things. They haven't committed murders. But it's an example of a tiny circumstance that can be added with a lot of other circumstances to build a fuller picture. I'm not suggesting that Mr. Carell was planning to murder Rachelle when he said that and burn her body, but in theory, if you had other evidence, you could use that to be evidence of premeditation, as distinct from an accident, if it ever came to having to resolve that conundrum. It is strangely not uncommon for murderers to make comments to other people about how they would dispose of a body or how they would kill someone if they were ever minded to do so, but of course deny that they ever would. I don't understand the mind of a murderer well enough to know why they would say such things, but they do. Again, Mr. Carell may just have been the victim of an unfortunate coincidence when he said that. It's only a tiny piece of evidence.
The topic of fire was a common line of questioning by Peter Singleton. Now for the first time, you're going to hear about evidence from a key witness, Kevin's ex-partner, who you know as Alice. She lived with Kevin for almost a year before she told him to move out. It was subsequently discovered he'd moved out in the months prior to Rachelle's death. This is not her voice, but here is part of her evidence at the inquest.
Did Kevin have a preferred method of getting rid of rubbish?
Yes.
Was it to go to the tip with it?
No.
What did he like to do?
Kevin liked to burn rubbish. And yes, he liked to burn rubbish, burn things. I'd cleaned out a whole lot of paperwork and, things that I've got a little shed up the very back of my property and I put a whole lot of stuff there to be taken to the tip or disposed of in some way. And he said he'd get rid of that for me. And on one particular day, I think I was having my car washed, so I had some items in my car that I took out of my car and put there, thinking they'd be safe. They were in bags, white garbage bags. They didn't look like rubbish to me, but anyway.
Even though they were in garbage bags?
Well, but they were in white garbage bags. The rest of the rubbish was rubbish, like it was all strewn there to be disposed of. But these bags, and I don't even think they were all white garbage bags, but I'd put things in. There was a beach bag which had my swimming stuff in it. There was a swimming costume in there that he didn't like me wearing. That was in that bag. There was I had a diploma, an original one of those beautiful diplomas that I had gained. And when I came home that day, the whole lot had been burnt, all the rubbish and all my things. And I just couldn't believe that he had just gone ahead and burnt things indiscriminately, including my belongings, which didn't look like rubbish, which were put apart from the rubbish.
After she broke up with Kevin, Alice began a relationship with Colin. You've heard him on Dear Rachelle before, because Alice told him quite a lot about Kevin. Did Kevin ever use this fire pit? Because Alice has given evidence that he used to have fires in the backyard.
The shed that was up the back was more like a bit of an open sort of shed. It was very old. There had been a fire had been built in the middle of it, in the floor in there. At the time when he said that he had got something out of there, I had noticed that the wheelbarrow had been moved because I had mowed the lawn, and recently I knew where I put the wheelbarrow, and the wheelbarrow had been moved. I had then sort of taken note of this little fire pit that was in the middle of this sort of garage or carport type of thing, and I did ask about it, and she said yes, he used to burn stuff there, but I thought it was a bit odd, but then I'd come to the realisation he was an odd person, so I thought, okay.
As you've just heard, Rachelle's inquest was explosive. Her body exhumed. 9 persons of interest scrutinised. So many questions needed to be answered. Who started the rumour about bikies cutting Rachelle's fingers off? Was there ever a Walkinshaw? What happened to her in those missing 9 hours after she left work? The inquest ran for 2 years, but concluded with an open finding. As Peter Singleton said in his opening address, what began as a blur had become much clearer.
Mr. Carell, what happened to Rachelle Childs that brought about the end of her life? On the advice of Mr. Johnston, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me. You killed Rachelle Childs, didn't you? On the advice of Mr. Johnston, 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 I refuse to answer that question. I refuse to answer that question. I refuse to answer that question. I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
On the next episode of Dear Rachelle, what was it like being married to Kevin Carell?
It's just hard to talk about. There was many sides to Kevin. You know, I spent 13 years with him. He threatened to, if I ever left him, he would hunt me down and find me. He would cut me up in little pieces.
What makes him so dangerous?
The fact that he can just snap is not to be trusted.
You do want to do this?
I do. It's just really hard that it happened to someone I loved. I would want someone like me to come forward. Just take it.
Let's have a break. Yeah, I'll just move that microphone away.
I feel sometimes like it's my fault.
Dear Rachelle is a multimedia production from True Crime Australia. If you want to be one of the first to find out what happens next, go to dearrachelle.com.au. That's where eligible Digital News Corp Australia subscribers get early access to podcast episodes and breaking news in our live investigation. And you will also find exclusive videos, interactive evidence, feature articles and more. That's dearrachelle.com.au. If you have any tips or confidential information to share with me, Ashlea Hansen, please send an email to dearrachelle@news.com.au. Our supervising producer and audio editor is Reese Gunter. Rachel Fountain is executive producer and audio director. Our executive editor is Sarah Blake. Our senior journalist is Patrick Carline. Video editors are Gillian McNally, Owen Yang and Stephen Woods. Picture editors are Jeff Darmanin and Kristy Miller. Senior camera operators are Daniel Andrews and Oscar Vieira, with sound design by Martin Peralta. Thanks also to Greg Thompson, Eleni Pineras, Shoba Rayo, Faye Gould, Vanessa Graham, Hayley Goddard, Stephen Grice, Charlotte Karp, Tina Coggins and Harry Hughes. Special thanks to the Daily Telegraph editor Ben English. And Dear Rachelle would not be possible without the help and unwavering support of Kristy and Anne Childs, Mindy Wicks, Damian Loone and Rachelle's friends. This podcast series is hosted and investigated by me, Ashlea Hansen.